I never should have opened my door to strangers. What came in was terrifying. I never should have opened that door. The moment my hand touched the cold, brass knob, a shiver ran down my spine. What was waiting for me on the other side? I had my routine. Coffee in hand, the candle flickering on the kitchen table. Everything felt safe. But then that knock. It echoed through my apartment, a sound that felt out of place. I hesitated. My heart raced. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness and shadows that melted together like a bad dream. The air felt dense and heavy. I could smell something faint, a putrid odor that clawed at my throat. Whispers began to swirl around me, low and hushed, just beyond my hearing. I turned away, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. But deep down, dread clawed at my insides. Finally, I threw the door open. There stood two figures cloaked in darkness, their faces obscured. A chill filled the space, seeping into my bones. "Can we come in?" they whispered in unison. My instincts screamed at me to close the door, but curiosity held me hostage. I stepped back, letting them in. As they crossed the threshold, shadows danced on the walls. The candle flickered violently, almost as if to warn me. They moved silently, eyes darting like frightened animals in the night. A book fell from my shelf with a loud thud, and I jumped. Instinctively, I clutched my chest, feeling the tightness build. The darkness deepened. The air grew cold, and the silence thickened. "What do you want?" I stammered, my voice barely audible. They exchanged glances. I could almost see something sinister there, hidden beneath their smiles. I felt the temperature drop, a frost creeping along my spine, the shadows growing heavier. Then came the scratching, soft at first, like fingernails along wood, then more insistent. My breath quickened. Objects began moving on their own, rattling quietly as if something was stirring beneath the surface. My heart hammered in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, but couldn't tear my gaze away from them. Suddenly, they stepped closer. Their faces emerged from the shadows, features twisted in ways I couldn't understand. I was frozen in place, a deer caught in headlights. And just when I thought the worst was over, a loud bang echoed through the apartment. The door slammed shut behind them. My blood ran cold, panic bubbling inside me. What had I let in? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadows thickened, surrounding me like a suffocating blanket. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, a steady drum of dread. The two figures lingered just out of reach, their faces a grotesque blend of fear and glee. The scratching noise intensified, now a frantic clawing, as if something malevolent was desperate to escape whatever realm it was trapped in. "Why are you here?" I managed to croak, each word heavy with trepidation. The taller figure moved first, inching closer. I caught a glimmer of white in the darkness's smile. Perhaps it was a mockery of warmth, sending shivers rippling through my skin. "Your door opened," it said, voice echoing as if borrowed from another world. Now the rite begins with that. Something inside me broke. A flood of images invaded my mind, distant screams, faces twisted in agony, the smell of burnt flesh. I stumbled back, colliding with the kitchen table, the candle flickering perilously, casting wild shadows that morphed into the figures of writhing souls. The other figure, short and grotesque, pointed toward the darkened hallway that led to my bedroom. "It's so hungry," it whispered, an oily tongue flicking over its thin lips. "We've come to satisfy its craving." What did they mean? An icy realization hit me. I had always felt a presence in my home, something lurking just beyond my awareness. Now it felt as though that something was inching closer, its breath ghosting over my skin without thinking. I bolted toward the door, but it was no use. It wouldn't budge. My desperate yanks against the handle produced nothing but an eerie silence that pressed in on me. I turned back to the figures, now flanking me on either side, their eyes dark pools of malice. "Let us show you," the tall one murmured, and with a swift movement, it raised a hand, fingers elongated, tips glistening like long, sharp teeth. My breath caught as the lights flickered, plunging the room into pitch blackness. A sudden burst of sound exploded around me, distant thumps and hisses, the scraping of claws on concrete. My heart lodged in my throat, the world narrowing down to nothing but the echoing chaos. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and instinctively, I screamed. "Look!" The voice was louder now, coming from the depths of the hallway, beckoning me as if it was a siren calling out to lure me into the black abyss. When the lights flickered back on, I was no longer alone. Dark forms spilled from the hallway, twisting and writhing, eyes glowing with the same insatiable hunger that clawed at my sanity. They moved with unnatural speed, weaving through my living room, filling the space with an overwhelming urgency. I staggered backward as the figures closing in on me stepped aside, revealing a swirling mass of darkness, pulsating as if it were alive. I could feel its malevolence wrapping around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Desperation clawed at my mind. I needed to find an escape, but the shadows pressed in, suffocating, consuming. Just before I lost all hope, the tall figure leaned in, its breath rancid. "Join us," it whispered, each word laced with a chilling promise. "You don't want to be left out, do you?" Before I could reply, the ground beneath me trembled. The walls began to close, the shadows growing overwhelming. My vision swirled, fear sinking like a stone in my gut. And then the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices from the void joining together in a haunting melody, a plea or a condemnation. "Choose," they chorused, the vibrations resonating against the walls. "Choose your fate." As the shimmering mass darted toward me, I felt a sharp pain slice through my side. I gasped, clutching it, and when I looked down, blood seeped through my fingers, bright against the dark fabric of my shirt. And then, in a flash, I heard a quick intake of breath from behind me. I turned, and there stood a third figure, a mirror image of me, face pale, eyes wide with terror. It raised a trembling finger, pointing straight at me, then slowly began to smile. "Welcome home," it hissed, and before I could comprehend what was happening, the world tilted, and I was falling through the void, deeper into the shadows. The fall felt eternal, as if the very fabric of reality had splintered around me, plunging me into a torment that was both physical and mental. Time became disjointed. Seconds felt like hours, and the scream that erupted from my throat seemed to echo through an endless abyss. My mind raced through fragmented memories, a child's laughter, a lost friend, snatches of happiness drowning in a tidal wave of sorrow. Suddenly, I slammed against the cold, hard ground. The shock reverberated through my body, and as I lay there gasping, the shadows around me thickened, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I tried to rise, but the weight of the void pressed down, anchoring me in place. In that moment of immobilizing terror, a chilling realization crept into my bones. This was not just darkness. It was alive. Another flutter of sound reached my ears, whispers weaving through the haze. They were taunting, tempting, brushing against my psyche with ghastly familiarity. I turned, eyes straining, trying to pierce through the blackness. The dim light of an unseen source flickered like a dying ember, revealing grotesque figures crouching just beyond its reach, their elongated limbs twisted, bodies swaying, drawn into a grotesque dance of despair. "Look around," a voice echoed, sharp and inviting, mingling with the chorus of the obscured. "This is where they all gather, those who've lost their way." As I strained against the shadows, I caught sight of the mirror image of myself lingering at the edge of the light. It stood there, unmoving, eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "They're hungry," it murmured, sweetness dripping from each word like poisoned honey. "You see, they feed on despair, and you have so much to give." The ground trembled beneath me, writhing as if it possessed a will of its own. My heart raced, and I began to crawl away, your body battling against the unseen forces that loomed. I clambered toward the flickering light, praying that it led to some form of escape, but the shadows slithered around me, wrapping tight with longing fingers. "Don't run," the figures shrieked, their voices harmonizing in a wicked cacophony. "Stay and play." Panic surged through me as I pushed myself forward. With each movement, the whispers morphed, teasing, sparking memories of mistakes, regrets, and fears I was desperate to escape. My mother's disappointed expression, a betrayal from someone I loved, my own failure to save a friend from danger, the weight of it all was suffocating. And then, I saw them. Faces emerging from the swirling shadows, tormented, eyes wide with anguish, mouths moving in silent cries. Their lips twisted into desperate grins, knowing the source of their suffering lay in my heart. As they reached for me, I clamped my eyes shut, forcing myself to remember the light outside my door, the moments of joy that once filled my life. "Stop!" I screamed, and to my shock, the grasp of the shadows briefly lightened. "Please, stop." I clutched at my bleeding side, willing the pain to anchor me back to reality. But the laughter grew louder, an almost joyous frenzy reverberating through the void, drowning out my cries. "Let it go," they chanted, the figures closing in, the glee in their voices palpable. "Give in. Embrace your fate." With a final surge of desperation, I opened my eyes, fully aware of the horrors surrounding me. "No," I howled, and in doing so, summoned something deep within. Darkness surged as energy crackled around me. Suddenly, I was yanked forward, propelled like a shooting star into the horrors that lay beyond. But as I landed back in the flickering light, sprawled on the cold ground, I realized what I had done. I had crossed over, been made one of them without fully understanding it. My mirror self bore an unsettling grin, eyes gleaming with something unholy. "Welcome to your new beginning," it cooed, a jolt of fear racing up my spine. As the cacophony of agonized spirits surrounded us, I felt my body growing cold and numbing. A seed of something dark was planted deep within my soul, rooting itself with every heartbeat insatiable. Darkness I didn't want to embrace. And then I noticed Ida's spectral hand, twisting from the gloom, reaching toward me, its fingers curling in invitation. The others stepped aside, whispering as if I were the grand prize. "Choose," they echoed. And as the shadowy beyond beckoned with promises of nightmares unending, I felt the bone-deep pull, the impossible choice I had to make laid bare before me. Would I succumb to this darkness or fight against the torrent threatening to tear me apart? The laughter roared, and in that moment, I understood. I was not just fighting for my life. The very essence of who I was teetered on the edge of oblivion. Just as a shriek escaped my lips, the darkness surged, and everything went black. But before I could yield to it, a horrifying thought seared through my mind. What if I was meant to be the next keeper of the darkness? What lay ahead was unfathomable, and I would have to face it head-on. Then came the whispers again, louder than ever, promising me power, allure, everything I had ever desired. They taunted me as I spiraled into the unknown, where the boundary of who I once was began to blur, and all hope began to slip through my fingers like sand. The suffocating darkness enveloped me, an infinite void where my thoughts spiraled and twisted like vines in a tormenting embrace. The cacophony of laughter, once distant, now throbbed inside my skull, reverberating like a funeral dirge echoing through the tomb of my sanity. The spectral hand lingered in my mind, an unspeakable promise waiting to be acted upon. Fate's noose tightened around my throat, squeezing with deliberate slowness, taunting me with the inevitability of its grip. Amidst the laughter and chaos, I sensed a shift. The shadows, once chaotic and playful, hovered, molding into discernible forms, an assembly of faces etched in anguish and despair, their hollow eyes imploring me for reprieve, yet their mouths twisted in macabre delight. I lay trapped in a purgatory of emotions, a deep-seated fear bolting me in place, while a whisper of curiosity teased my breaking heart. "Join us." A voice beckoned, sweet yet tinged with malice. Embrace your true self, and you will never feel alone again. Images flickered before me. Wretched scenes of betrayal and anguish that played out like a distorted film, each memory darker than the last. I could hear my mother's voice, pleading yet distant, urging me not to succumb. But behind every warning, a voice emerged, wrapping around my consciousness like ivy around a skeletal tree, coaxing me closer to surrender. Foolish child, it crooned. You thought you could escape the shadows? We are part of you now. Without us, you are nothing. Desperation surged. I tore my gaze from the specters, the truth dawning heavy and cold. I was no longer simply a witness to their plight. I was interlinked in ways I dared not comprehend. The hands of those seeking solace began to reach toward me again, and I couldn't help but feel rather than recoil that the pain they represented wasn't foreign. It was a reflection of my own. Suddenly, the air grew electric, crackling with malevolent energy. The surroundings morphed, bending at impossible angles as if reality itself were surrendering to these cursed beings. I began to hear snippets of whispers, fragments of stolen lives, and newfound fears merging like a symphony of despair, vibrating through my very bones. Each word sent ice coursing through my veins, gnashing at the edges of my sanity. Will you give in? Will you be one of us? The choice lay heavy, an unwelcome weight against my chest. I could feel the call of darkness swelling inside me, mingling with the remnants of light that clung desperately to my heart. Suddenly, I was ripped from the ground, thrown upwards as the darkness loomed and pulsed, drawing me toward something cerulean that flickered like a dying star. And then it happened. A surge of anger ignited within my chest, as if it were an inferno breaking through the dam of despair that was draining my very essence. The laughter stuttered, the shadows recoiling as I screamed, "I choose to fight!" In that very second, the darkness around me recoiled as if struck, the shadows reshaping, contorting, revealing a grotesque visage, a horrifying amalgamation of the faces I had seen before. Their eyes burned with resentment as they surged closer, an army of torment, the whispers transforming into a menacing roar. "You will know us," they shrieked, their words slicing through the air like shards of glass. "You will be our host, whether you wish it or not." Ripping through the fabric of their grasp, I stumbled backward, glancing over my shoulder. I could see something lurking there, a flicker of light morphing into a tangible shape, a figure within the dark that beckoned through the chaos, a specter perhaps, or a remnant of something I yearned for. My heart raced, torn between the specters threatening to engulf me and the lighthouse flickering weakly ahead. Then it happened. Shadows erupted into swirling tendrils, stretching and writhing toward me, hungry and relentless. They swarmed like locusts, engulfing the glimmering promise of hope while whipping against my very skin, leaving behind a trail of searing cold. I could no longer tell what was reality and what was a figment of my crumbling psyche. The laughter morphed into a thunderous roar, drowning out my thoughts as I began to choke on despair. In this claustrophobic nightmare, I felt the very essence of who I was begin to slip away, roots of despair knitting tightly around my throat. Before I could catch my breath, I realized something. A shadowy, familiar silhouette emerged, piercing through the dark. It stood poised, illuminated by an eerie light, a reflection of my mirror self but tainted and twisted beyond recognition. A menacing grin stretching out in a gleeful invitation. "Join me." It hissed, extending its hand toward me, beckoning as the thrumming laughter was swallowed into an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. That I felt the pull, compelling, dizzying. The weight of the shadows bore down, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. As I faltered, the darkness surged, threatening to consume me whole. And then, seizing my last shred of autonomy, I surged toward the shadow. "I will not be yours," I bellowed, but before I could escape the suffocating grasp of the void, the figure lunged forward, mouth wide open, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Just as the abyss threatened to swallow me whole, it bit into my shoulder, leaving behind an icy numbness that spread throughout my body like wildfire. And then came the screams. My own voice mingled with theirs, echoing in horror as the shadows finally claimed me, the darkness surging with such intensity that all light extinguished around me. That I in that Final momenta rush of thoughts collided in a chaotic frenzy, memories unraveling like threads from a spool. Would I become one of them, relegated to an existence of pain and torment, or would I find some way to break free? As blackness swept over me, I knew it was only the beginning of something far more sinister than I could ever comprehend. The shadows were only the gateway, and I was their unwilling participant. And then I realized, in the suffocating dark of nothingness, I was no longer alone. Something else stirred beside me, awakening with hungry intent. The last thing I saw before everything faded was a flash of my own reflection smiling back a reflection that wasn't mine at all. I drifted in the abyss, awareness flickering like a moth trapped against the flame of an unseen horror. The laughter had muted, but the echoing screams of the faces I had glimpsed still reverberated in my Mindan eternal requiem that perforated the fabric of my thoughts. Suddenly, the oblivion thinned, its weight lifting ever so slightly, and I felt a gentle tugging at the edges of my consciousness. It was an invitation, a call to Awakento confront the darkness that had come to claim me. I opened my eyes to what felt like a dawn, though the light was fractured and dim, casting elongated shadows that danced grotesquely along the walls. I was no longer floating in nothingness but rather sprawled in a decrepit room, the air thick and stale, heavy with the metallic tang of old blood. The walls pulsed, as if breathing in tandem with my own panicked breaths. They peeled like shattered bark, exposing the wet, oozing underbelly of what lay beneath. I stood shakily as fragments of memories returned. Sharp images slid through my mind, the silhouettes of the tortured souls, their faces twisted in agony juxtaposed with the grin of my own reflection. But more alarming was the sensation coiling around my heart, an unfamiliar familiarity with the darkness, an insidious connection that made me feel like I belonged to this hellish realm. The floor beneath me bent and warped, sending tremors through my feet. I wobbled, clutching my head as I stumbled forward, seeking the only exit I could discern, a doorway at the far end of the gloom. I sensed movement in the corners, fleeting glimpses of shadows pulsating just beyond the reach of the meager light. They beckoned and hissed, promising secrets and depth beyond understanding. My pulse quickened with dread as I approached the door, its wooden frame splintered and sagging, as if it bore the weight of every soul that had passed through it before me. With a deep, bracing breath, I pushed it open. Outside was not the sanctuary I had yearned for. I stood in a long, narrow corridor, entirely different from the room where I regained my consciousness. The walls dripped with sweat, or perhaps it was something more sinister, something alive. My skin crawled with the awareness that I was being watched. Shadows slithered just out of sight, their whispers merging with the faint, mocking laughter echoing through the hall. Every step felt like a betrayal of my own instincts as I ventured deeper into the nightmarish labyrinth. The laughter rose and fell like the tide, curling around me, holding me captive. I realized then that it wasn't my solitude I needed to fear, it was the audience that lay in wait, hidden behind their masks of grief and horror. As I navigated further, I could hear the shuffling of bodies, scratching against the walls, the cries of tormented souls trapped in an unending torment that twisted my gut into a tight knot. I felt their pain, their yearning to escape, or perhaps to drag me into their abyss. Suddenly, the floor shifted with unsettling speed, and I stumbled, falling hard against the ground. I landed in an expanse filled with shattered mirrors, each fragment reflecting not only my image but echoes of the faces that had haunted me. In each shard, I saw them twisted smiles, hollow eyes mimicking my despair in perfect synchronicity. And then I felt it again, a surge of cold, a breath against my neck that sent prickles of ice slicing down my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," a whisper slithered forth, as soft as silk but sharp as daggers. Suddenly, the laughter erupted around me, drowning out everything, but then it morphed into screams of terror that clawed at my psyche. I scrambled to my feet, desperate to flee, yet the corridor spun unpredictably, trapping me in its maddening grip. I turned back, straining my eyes against the foggy gloom that threatened to envelop my very soul when I stopped abruptly. A mirror hanging on the wall flickered violently, its surface swirling like a tempest, and in its depths, a figure began to form. It was me, but not. The reflection was twisted, a grotesque caricature filled. with malice. The creature grinned wider, its eyes dark voids filled with something unnameable. "Oh, sweet child of darkness," it cooed, its voice dripping with derision. "Did you truly think you could escape? We are bound together now. You and I. We cannot be separated." I felt my heart race, terror overtaking rational thought, as the figure reached out from the mirror, hands extending toward me like gnarled roots longing for soil. The corridor shuddered, walls breathing heavily, and in that instant, everything erupted. The laughter crescendoed into a roaring wave crashing against my senses, and I saw the grotesque faces materializing around me, their mouths stretched in silent screams. They darted closer, their breaths hot and rancid. With only a heartbeat to act, I turned to run, but the hallway buckled, collapsing into an endless chasm of shadow and despair. My mind screamed for salvation, but all I could see was the mirror's dark reflection, the dreadful invitation pulsing with a rhythmic insistence. Just as I thought I would be swallowed whole, the ceiling above cracked ominously, and a flood of light poured through the fissure-not illumination, but a blinding, searing brightness that threatened to burn away the darkness surrounding me. As I shielded my eyes, I felt the figure's grip at my shoulder, tightening, pulling me toward the mirror. "Join us," it cried, voice a symphony of chaotic joy, and I understood in that miserable instant that the choice to fight may come at an unimaginable cost. Before I could scream, the light consumed everything, and I was dragged into the abyss. A once familiar world turned feloniously strange and hostile. A new horror awaited as the mirror shattered, revealing a realm beyond mere existence. And as I plummeted into uncharted depths, a single thought remained, gnawing at my sanity. What awaited on the other side of the dark reflection? I drifted for what felt like eternity, suspended between the reality I had known and the chaos I had just fled. The sensation of falling twisted into suffocating weightlessness, reminding me of the darkness I sought to escape. Each heartbeat reverberated through the void, echoing the terrifying truth: I was bound to that realm, forever entwined with the horrors that lurked in its shadows. As I plunged through the ethereal gloom, I began to feel fragments of an unseen hand grasping at me, clawing and tearing through unseen fabric. Fear flooded my senses, yet I was too far removed to cry out. It was not until I struck a ground that felt both solid yet repulsive, coated in an unknown viscous substance, that I could finally gasp for breath. The atmosphere was thick with decay, each inhalation tainted with the pungent odor of rot, that I staggered to my feet, trembling under the weight of an unmistakable presence. Dim light flickered in the distance, illuminating grotesque shapes weaving through the mist. They moved in uncanny synchrony, each figure a distortion of humanity. Cloaked in shadows infused with the stench of despair, I felt them watching, their vacant eyes boring into my soul, their intentions unreadable. In that moment, I knew I was not alone in this abysmal realm. It was a collective consciousness, a hive of anguish and madness. With each step I took, I heard a faint whisper, like the rustle of dead leaves, beckoning me. "Join us. Become one with your own nightmares." The voices melded, drawing me closer to whatever horror awaited me in the depths. There, beyond the gathering shadows, I discerned a grand archway cloaked in a haze that shimmered like heat rising from the pavement on a summer's day, giving a tantalizing glimpse into a world obscured, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. I approached the archway. The walls here were sticky with something that oozed as I brushed against them, and the floor beneath me was slick, almost like walking through a silent tide of despair. I reached out to grip the jagged edges of the archway, its surface pulsating beneath my fingertips as though it possessed its own beating heart. Suddenly, the laughter swelled again, an eerie symphony of mirth that contrasted sharply with an overwhelming sense of grief. The sound seeped into my bones, setting off a primal instinct to flee. But the archway pulled. Mesothing inside demanded I cross its threshold. Perhaps it was the promise of knowledge or the allure of forbidden secrets. An insatiable hunger clawed within me for clarity amidst the chaos. With a firm resolve, I stepped through. The moment my foot crossed that threshold, I was engulfed in an overpowering brightness that felt like being reborn into a furnace. The world shifted once more, the air charged with electric anticipation. On either side of me, shadowy figures flickered in and out of existence. Their faces were familiar yet warp-ita captured essence of souls that had once breathed, laughed, and lived. They stared at me with a mixture of longing and malice, as if rooting for my downfall or seeking to reclaim what was once theirs. Before I could gather my bearings, a cacophony erupted, an amalgamation of cries cascading like a torrent, flooding every sense with an overwhelming tide of emotions I could not comprehend. Shapes whirled around me, merging and swirling like a tempest of lost souls. As I covered my ears, the voices intertwined with my own memories, twisting my fears into grotesque parodies. "Help us!" echoed a voicey mournful wail that resonated deep within my chest, compelling me to respond. My hands trembled in response, reaching out, ready to embrace the tragedy laid bare before me through the chaos. I caught a glimpse of a figure emerging from behind the archway, its limbs angular and grotesque. It floated effortlessly, its skin a slick, murky sheen, devoid of features, yet its presence was weighted with unbearable sorrow. It extended a hand toward me, the dark voids where its eyes should have been bearing into my very essence. "Would you save us?" pleaded, the words dripping with desperation. "Or will you become one of us?" An icy dagger of fear pressed against my heart as I felt the air grow dense with anticipation. I hesitated, caught in a moment of indecision, but something within urged me forward, a magnetic force drawing me deeper in that instant. As if sensing my wavering resolve, the figures erupted into frenzied energy, their cries grew deafening, reverberating through my skull. The ground trembled beneath my feet, the archway pulsating as if it were a portal ready to consume everything in its path. And in that instant of chaos, the creature lunged toward me and I felt its cold fingers latching onto my wrist. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the faces behind me, their hollow eyes filled with a mixture of terror and something more sinister, each mouth forming silent cries. And then the world went black, leaving me teetering on the edge of an eternity of darkness, caught between salvation and despair. What lay in that abyss when consciousness returned, and would I be able to escape the grip of what had claimed me? The moment before consciousness had slipped away, panic had flooded my veins, electrifying every nerve with a surge of fear. But when I came to, the suffocating blackness dissolved, replaced by an unsettling stillness that stretched taut around me. I opened my eyes to find myself engulfed in an unnatural twilight, the air thick as syrup, weighing heavily on my chest. Confusion engulfed me. I couldn't tell if I had been reborn or condemned to a new prison. As I sat up, the ground beneath my palm felt febrile, the surface pulsating like the broken wings of a trapped insect. I looked around and recognized that I was not in the archway anymore, nor could I clearly recall how I had managed to arrive in this new hell. Jagged rocks jutted out from the ground, their surfaces glistening as if coated in some spectral dew, while the shadows between them danced unsettlingly, suggesting I was not alone. A low hum rippled through the air, a sound that curled in my ears like smoke. In each pulse of the hum, I felt the resonance of a heartbeat. Was it mine? Echoing through the gloom. I swung my legs over the edge of what seemed to be a large stone slab, the chill creeping through my skin. Exploring each inch I exposed, shadows shifted again, this time more purposefully. They coalesced into amorphous forms that blended with the surrounding darkness, moving closer with a hunger that invoked a primal fear within me. "Not her," one whispered in a voice that sounded like a raspy breath of despair. "We will find her. Find her again." My heart raced. In my sheer panic, I stumbled backward, pushing against the cool stone wall behind me. Its surface felt alive, shifting like a living creature. I was trapped in the midst of something vast and wrong, a world distorted beyond comprehension. The echoes of longing filled the air, an undulating wave of despair that tugged at the edges of my memory. "Help us!" The voices surged again, from what seemed to be just beyond the flickering shadows. It was the same mournful wail I recalled from moments before darkness consumed me. Was there an echo of familiarity, or had I merely imagined it? Caught between the urge to flee and an inexplicable desire to connect, I hesitated again. Suddenly, the gloom split with a horrifying scream, yanking my attention. A figure burst forth from the Shadowsa child, raven-haired and mud-streaked, her eyes wide and terrified as she stumbled toward me, arms outstretched. "Please, help me," she begged, her voice tinged with an otherworldly echo that set my teeth on edge. "They are coming for me, and they know you're here." The shadows flickered around her, thinning momentarily, revealing the twisted forms lurking within. A pair of ghastly faces emerged, bodies contorted and skin stretched across bones, their mouths fixed in grotesque grins that spoke of eternal torment. They moved like phantoms, slipping between realms with an ease that was sickening. "Stay with us." A chorus of voices rose, shrill and insistent, and my heartbeat ached in my ears. "What do you want?" I shouted, backed against the wall, my breath coming in rapid gasps. The child, eyes glistening with tears inviting despair, faltered in her advance. "They want you blood," she cried, the guttural undertone hinting at something dark and sinister. In that split second, a dreadful realization crept. Aini was not merely at the mercy of these apparitions. Somehow, I was tied to them, shackled by sorrow, a vessel for their torment. The figures swelled around us, only now their eyes blazed with a malevolent hunger, fixated on me like a wolf eyeing its next meal. "Join us." The figures hissed, their voices a cacophony of mournful laughter, echoing through the rock formations, closing in like a vice. Before I could scream, cold hands grabbed at my ankles, the sound of tearing fabric mixed with a sinister chant surrounding me. The child shrieked, "Don't let them take you. You have to fight." Adrenaline surged, coursing through my body like wildfire. I lunged forward, tugging the child with me as I tore past the closest shadow, its fingers raking through my hair, pulling desperately. The sensation was like ice piercing through flesh, a reminder that escape was not guaranteed. But as I ran, the world around me writhed and twisted. Shadows morphed into grotesque nightmares, faces of the lost enveloping me in their embrace of anguish. I could feel their cold breath against my skin, and fear spiraled within, amplifying each echo of their relentless pursuit. Just as I reached the brink of a cavernous doorway, flanked by glimmering shards of stone that resembled broken glass, the child's hand slipped from my grasp, replaced by an unseen force that latched onto my wrist with suffocating intensity. Time hung suspended as I turned to look back. Her expression was one of tragic defeat, the shadows coiling around her like smoke. "You must go." You could still her words faded into a pitiful wail, swallowed by the cavern's dark mouth, as tendrils of night snatched her away, pulling her into the depths. "No!" I screamed, desperately stretching my hand toward her. But it was too late. The shadows whispered triumphantly, weaving her form into their fabric of despair. The doorway loomed closer, and I had no choice but to plunge through it, an inexplicable urge to escape the horrors behind pulling me into the unseen. Just as the piercing darkness enveloped me again, I felt the grip loosen from my wrist, and in an instant, I was alone once more, waiting on the precipice of an even darker revelation. And then, from within the void, a familiar whisper drifted through the suffocating silence. "You shouldn't have run." The air in the void thickened, creating an oppressive weight that pressed down upon me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine like icy fingers, and my stomach twisted as the disembodied voice echoed again, circling me like a wolf stalking its prey. "You shouldn't have run." It was lullaby-like, dripping with menace and malice. Around me, the darkness seemed to swirl and pulse, morphing like a living thing, flashing neon glimpses of memories not my own, but fragments of sorrow, laughter, betrayal. The sting of tears welled in my eyes as I fought to breathe, the grief I felt for the child mingling with an overwhelming sense of dread. "Where are you?" I choked out, my voice cracking under the weight of despair, echoing into the nothingness. "What do you want from me?" A whisper of laughter brushed past my ear, bitter and taunting. "You know what we want," it hissed, blending seamlessly into the fabric of the darkness. "We need you. You are one of us now." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream and fight, but the words lodged in my throat, a potent potion of fear and disbelief. The haunting memories pressed closer, images of the child's anguished face sewn into the fabric of my mind, the twisted shadows hunting her with their insatiable appetite. My heart thundered with every uneven beat. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet trembled. Hot breath like smoke billowed around me as figures began to emerge from the obsidian darkness. They shuffled forth like malnourished specters, long-limbed and spectral. Their skin stretched over sharp bones, twisted features contorted in agony and longing. Hollow eyes stared through me, igniting my deepest fears, the fear of becoming one of them. "Help us," they rasped in unison, their voices weaving a morbid lullaby, beckoning me forward. "Why?" I stammered. "What do you want?" "Our pain cannot rest," they answered, their voices mingling with a rising wail that cut through the air. "Join us to escape it. You have the power." Power? The word echoed in my mind, stirring up an ancient fear that coiled within me, taking root in the very essence of my being. I felt the shadows reaching out again, creeping along my skin, urging me to surrender to their whispers. "No," I shouted, clenching my fists, fighting against their allure. "I won't become like you. Is that so?" A voice dripped with mockery and malice came forth, deeper and darker than the others. I turned, and my breath hitched as a colossal figure materialized, cloaked in shadows thicker than the night itself. A face began to form, grotesque yet alluring, a parody of humanity, features twisting as if molded by pain. With each movement, the room crackled with energy, framing the figure as something both caged and vast, a monstrous reflection of grief distilled into flesh. "You believe you have a choice, but we are connected. You have felt our sorrow, our despair. You are ours." The ground pulsated beneath me, growing warmer, dangerously close to becoming molten. My heart raced as I felt the shadow's grip tighten again, fibers of darkness weaving into my skin. "No!" I screamed, wrenching away, sending ripples through the pool of dark energy swirling at my feet. In that moment, I felt something shift within me, a sense of awakening layered with horror as the memories forged by the darkness began to seep into my consciousness. Flickering images filled my mind, shards of abandoned lives, stories unwritten, of people like the child trapped, lost, consumed, just as I would be if I gave in. One memory in particular broke through the swelling tide. A woman, shrouded in tattered gray fabric, her face veiled in shadow, hauntingly familiar. Her voice echoed in my mind like a siren call, tangled with the cries of the lost. "You have the strength to break the chains. Your blood binds us, but it is your spirit that will determine your fate." With a wild surge of will, I tore my gaze from the figure before me and, with every ounce of strength, forced myself to walk backward, feeling warmth flickering behind me, a glimmer of light, an escape. Shadows recoiled, wailing in anguish, as I rushed toward the light, but as I broke toward the threshold, something heavy collided against my ribcage, knocking me back, sending cries of pain and laughter spiraling into the void. I staggered to my knees and looked back in horror. The colossal figure loomed even larger now, eyes shining with sadistic hunger. "Join us," it sang, almost sweetly now. "You can't escape what you are." Screams of sorrow tore through my lungs, but before I could react, I felt my surroundings warp, twisting with violent intent. The shadows surged forth, engulfing me in an inky mass, cutting off all avenues of escape. And as I was swallowed, the last thing I heard was the deafening echo of countless souls inhaling, a sinister chant resonating through the earth. "Welcome home, then." A terrible stillness enveloped me, my senses numbing into the abyss of despair. And from the choking void, a single crystal-clear whisper coiled around my heart, chilling me to the core. "We found you." The suffocating stillness split suddenly, a crack of sickly sweet laughter echoing through the vast emptiness. I felt myself floating, untethered, in a horror that gnawed at my sanity. The former whispers had dissipated, evaporating into a concerning quiet that wrapped itself around me like a silk shroud. Percolating dread seeped into my bones, gagging the fight left within me. "You wanted answers," a voice cooed from the dark, a familiar timbre sliced with malice. "Now you shall earn them." I felt the very fabric of the void shift around me, turbulence beneath unseen waves threatening to wrench apart my tethering mind. Suddenly, with a forceful lurch, I was pulled through murky depths, the veil of the void splitting like gossamer threads. I landed without grace on hard-packed earth. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed myself to my feet, blinking against the dim light that flickered menacingly above. A feeling of displacement pounded in my chest. I wasn't merely in another realm now, but in the very heart of the darkness itself. Ahead of me lay a sinister tableau, a dilapidated playground bathed in ghastly moonlight. Rusting swings hung lifelessly from rotting chains as thick mist coiled around the ground like spectral children lost in their play. I cautiously moved forward, piecing together the eerie location that felt layered in memories swirling with grief. A lingering sensation scratched at the edges of recollection. A scene should have been familiar but blossomed into dread. My pulse quickened as laughter snaked through the air, the voices of children rippling through the shadows. "Join us!" they called, harmonizing in sweet summer voices filled with playful innocence. My heart twisted. Those were the children's voices, the ones I had been clinging to in frantic dreams, desperately praying to hear again. But even as I ached for their return, an unspeakable fear bubbled within my gut. I turned, and there in the drape of darkness, a figure swayed. Cloaked in wisps of mist, it twisted and contorted unnaturally, as if sewn together with fragments of lost souls. "Can't you hear them?" it hissed, its voice scraping against my skin like claws. "They are already yours, waiting to play." Instinct kicked in. I turned to flee, racing away from the laughter that now morphed into agonized screams. But the ground beneath me began to buckle, roots erupting from the soil as if the very earth sought to claim me, to tether me tighter in its grip. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance, my breath quickening. Then came the wailing, ancient and sorrowful, echoing from all around. I looked back and saw them. Countless spectral figures, children flickering in and out of existence, their faces twisted, frozen in a reflection of terror and grief. "Help us!" they cried, their melodies reverberating painfully in my ears. "You can save us." "No!" I screamed, my voice lost in the cacophony. I staggered away, unwilling to yield, but the shadows clawed closer with a horrid intimacy. They intertwined with my legs, tugging me back toward the playground, the midnight mist refusing to let go. In that dreadful moment, the colossal shape reformed before me, a silhouette against the underbelly of turmoil. "They have awaited you, just as you've awaited them. The tether grows stronger. Would you sever their hope?" The grotesque voice curled around me as though it could suffocate the remnants of my fight. "That isn't hope, it's a trap," I cried, pushing against the encroaching darkness. "I will not succumb." And yet as I was drawn, my resolve began to wane, the air thickening with tantalizing despair that hungered for my surrender. I shut my eyes tight, memories cascading around me like blurring raindrops, warm evenings spent in laughter, the promise of hugs and stories. I could not die here, a smudge in this unhallowed ground. In my heart, an ember sparked, flickering against the stifling forces around. The woman once veiled from my memory surged forward, her whisper melding with the children's Krisa forbidden incantation. "Find your core," she urged. "Only then can you shatter their chains." But before I could muster the strength to break free, a deafening roar erupted from behind me, sending shockwaves through the earth. The colossal figure lunged, morphing and twisting in a grotesque hunger, racing to claim me. Shadows wrapped around my ankles like chains of iron, dragging me back toward the suffocating darkness of the playground. I felt the panic unfurl violently within me. I had to act. I screamed in defiance, the sound ricocheting through the void, a final attempt to summon that flicker of strength. But just as I wrenched free momentarily, I felt sharp ice pierce my side, an ethereal essence coiling tighter. The shadows flickered behind me, whispering laughter merging with the screams of lost children. Then, suddenly, the ground rumbled violently, splitting open like a scar. I was thrust forward, sucked into the very maw of the abyss, darkness unfurling and consuming everything. And as I was drawn into that chaotic chasm, the last vision I caught was my reflection beneath, morphing into the familiar figure of the child. "I will be waiting," she whispered, hope and terror intertwining in her voice, the echo of her plea dissolving into nothingness. Then, with a brutally jarring finality, the void snapped shut, enveloping everything into its insatiable darkness. Silence reigned. But deep in that quiet, a new whisper emerged, blooming with a terrifying clarity. You've awakened us all. I couldn't escape the cocoon of darkness that surrounded me. It wrapped around my body, thick and suffocating, while echoes of despair wrapped around my mind. I felt the tremors of lost souls reverberate through the ground, their cries intermingling with my own racing heartbeat. Time slipped through my fingers like sand as I struggled against the chains of memory binding me to this horrifying realm. Then there was a crack, reviving my senses as the shadows flickered and twisted. A picture materialized in front of me, an image from my past that I had fought so hard to sever. My childhood home, once warm and filled with laughter, now stood in ruin, its walls crumbling like brittle paper. I could see myself through the cracked window, laughing, blind to the lurking shadows in the corners of the room, the presence that had followed me for as long as I could remember. Join us, a voice whispered, smooth and flirtatious like silk brushing against skin. A dark figure stepped out from the depths, swathed in shadows, keeping pace with my terror. It bore the face of my own reflection, twisted and unnatural. Why waste time resisting? We can show you the power that rests within you. You don't need to fight anymore. No, I gasped, the word feeling foreign on my tongue, drowning as nostalgic anguish washed over me. I didn't belong here. I had fought against this embrace all my life, and yet here it was, offering solace. My muscles ached with the weight of the decision. Could I let go? Could I invite the shadows in, let them teach me their secrets? But at the cost of what? Suddenly, the scene shifted again, brighter this time. The playground returned, filled with the laughter of joyful children. The joy felt palpable, but with each gleeful giggle, a sinister undercurrent brushed against my reality. I was losing them. No, I was losing myself in this horror. Help us, Mommy! Don't leave us! They cried, voices piercing through the haze of my memories. Despair clawed at my heart. I couldn't abandon them again, couldn't walk away like I had done so many times before. The hands of shadowy figures reached for me, their grasp like talons digging into my flesh. Save them, my reflection crooned. You can be their savior if you only embrace what you are. No, I screamed, unable to drown out the cackling laughter that erupted behind me. The figures shifted and swirled, merging and unmerging, rising like a tide ready to consume everything in their wake. The children's cries morphed into screams of agony, echoing in a cacophony that resonated through the cavity of my soul. You cannot run forever, my reflection whispered, slinging its arms wide apart in a grotesque imitation of welcome. You have their blood. You are one of us. A chilling realization gripped me as reality fractured. I was the keeper of despair, the vessel of their grief, the reason for this existence. The world shifted one last time, the mirror image of myself threw its head back in a howl of laughter, inviting the shadows to envelop me completely. Suddenly, an overwhelming surge of memories cascaded through my mind, the laughter, the joy, the love I used to know before the darkness seeped in, before doubt planted roots and buried me beneath its weight. And then the visions of the children, their piquant faces fading as they being dragged further into the darkness. No, I roared, the very essence of my being igniting with a flame brighter than anything I had ever known. I won't lose them. The shadows roared in retaliation, trying to snuff out that flicker of defiance. Believing that defiance could stave off their hunger, I fought against them, surging forward, dreading the idea of shattering under their endless pressure. But as I pushed forward into the haze of despair, I felt the souls writhing around me, their cold fingers clawing at my arms, feeding on the fight within. I sensed their energies entwining with my own in abhorrence I had never known. With a sudden clarity, I internalized their anguish. It was mine. Their sorrow was stitched into the fabric of my soul. Strength surged through me in waves. Was no longer just an escapee, but a keeper of their cries. My own pain merged with theirs, a symphony of suffering stoking the fire within. I will save you. I shouted into the chaos, confronting the voice of my past, a deeper force binding me not just to this void, but to all that had led me here. I focused on the children's laughter once more. I am your mother, and I will fight with every breath. With a final heartbeat, the darkness exploded outward, casting away the shadows tighter than I could have imagined. Light poured in as I became a vessel for all the lost souls toward a path of liberation. And then, just when it seemed victory was within my grasp, a new voice rang out, cold and hollow, echoing all around me. You're too late. The darkness will never leave. That I turned in horror to find my beloved children, twisted figures looming in the darkness, eyes wide and hollow as if something unfathomable lurked beneath their frightened gazes. I told you to come play, they whispered in unison. Reality fractured anew, but this time I felt something sinister and ancient coiling inside of me, whispering promises of power that came with a cost. If I would become their savior, the cost would be my very soul. The shadows sharpened, rising as the ground fell away beneath me, and as I fell into the abyss, I heard one last, chilling whisper, echoing endlessly through the darkness. Welcome to your new home.